You get paid on Friday. By Wednesday, you're opening your banking app, wondering where it all went. You didn't buy a new phone, you didn't book a vacation, you didn't spend thousands of dollars on something ridiculous, and yet, your paycheck has somehow disappeared again. If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. Millions of people experience exactly the same thing every single month, and most of them come to the same conclusion. I must be terrible with money. But here's something surprising. That usually isn't the real problem, because the reason your paycheck disappears so quickly has very little to do with one bad financial decision. It's usually the result of dozens of tiny ones, so small you barely notice them happening. By themselves, they seem harmless. Together, they quietly consume an entire paycheck, and that's exactly what makes them dangerous. Here's the strange part. If someone asked you, right now, to list every purchase you made over the last month, how many could you actually remember? Probably the expensive ones, the restaurant where you celebrated, the new headphones, the birthday gift. But what about the coffee you grabbed on Monday morning, the convenience fee you paid without thinking, the subscription that renewed while you were asleep? Those are much harder to remember, not because you're forgetful, because modern spending has been designed to disappear into the background. The easier companies make it to spend money, the less likely you are to notice you're spending it. That's not an accident. It's a business model. Think about how different buying something used to be. You drove to the store, walked through the aisles, picked up the item, waited in line, handed over cash. Every step reminded you you were spending money. Today, you tap one button, your fingerprint confirms the purchase, and 30 seconds later, you've already forgotten it happened. Convenience saves time, but it also removes something incredibly valuable: friction. And friction turns out to be one of the most powerful forms of financial self-control. Behavioral economists have spent years studying why people spend the way they do. One of the biggest discoveries is surprisingly simple. Your brain treats small purchases very differently from large ones. Spend $500 on a television, and you'll probably think about it for days. Spend $8 on coffee, and your brain barely registers it as a financial event. Neither purchase is invisible. One simply feels too small to matter, until it happens again and again and again. Here's what's fascinating. The biggest purchases usually aren't what keep people broke. The smallest ones often do. Because your brain is built to notice one giant expense, it isn't built to notice 50 tiny ones. And companies understand that remarkably well. They don't need you to spend hundreds of dollars today. They simply need you to forget you're spending $10 every few days. So where does the money actually go? For most people, it disappears through 4 invisible leaks. Each one feels too small to matter, but together, they quietly drain your paycheck before the next one ever arrives. The first leak is one you've probably stopped noticing altogether: subscriptions. Most people can easily tell you what they pay for rent, or their car, or their phone bill. But ask them to list every subscription leaving their account each month, and suddenly things become much less certain. Streaming services, cloud storage, music, fitness apps, premium memberships, software, free trials that quietly became paid subscriptions months ago. Individually, they don't seem expensive. $7, $10, $15, nothing alarming. That's exactly why they survive. Research suggests the average person now pays for somewhere between 7 and 12 recurring subscriptions. Stack them together, and many people are spending well over $150 every month. That's nearly $2,000 a year. Not because of one expensive decision, because of a collection of tiny ones made months apart and almost completely forgotten. Financial writer Morgan Housel once observed that small recurring leaks are often more dangerous than large expenses. Big purchases force you to stop and think. Small ones quietly blend into the background. One subscription doesn't matter. Neither does the second, or the third. But eventually, you're paying for services you forgot existed. Some you barely use, Others you stopped using months ago, yet the charges keep arriving right on schedule. And because they're automatic, they rarely trigger the question, do I still need this? That's the first leak, but strangely, it usually isn't the biggest one, because the second leak is happening almost every single day. Subscriptions are easy to forget, but they aren't the only reason your paycheck disappears. The second leak is much sneakier. Small purchases, not the expensive ones, the tiny ones. The coffee on your way to work, the snack from the convenience store, the bottle of water you grabbed because you were in a hurry, the extra item you added to your online cart because it's only a few dollars. None of these feel like financial decisions. They feel almost invisible, and that's exactly what makes them so powerful. Behavioral economist Richard Thaler discovered something fascinating. People don't evaluate every dollar equally. A $200 purchase usually forces a conversation. Do I really need this? An $8 purchase rarely does. Your brain quietly labels it, not important. But here's the problem. Money doesn't care whether you lose it $8 at a time or $800 at once. The result is exactly the same. Let's do some simple math. Suppose you spend just $8 a day on little things you barely notice, a coffee, a snack, a convenience purchase. That's $56 a week, around $240 every month, nearly $3,000 every year. $3,000 spent so gradually that not a single purchase ever felt expensive. That's the trap. Your bank balance doesn't disappear all at once. It evaporates, one invisible transaction at a time. Here's what's interesting. None of those purchases are bad. Coffee isn't bad. Buying lunch isn't bad. Treating yourself isn't bad. The danger isn't any one purchase. The danger is never seeing the total. Because your brain remembers stories, not spreadsheets. It remembers the one expensive purchase. It forgets the 40 tiny ones. And that's exactly why companies love small payments. They don't need your spending to feel painful. They need it to feel effortless. The easier it is to say yes, the less likely you are to ask, was this actually worth it? That brings us to the third and perhaps the most dangerous leak of all. Convenience. This one has quietly become one of the biggest hidden expenses in modern life. Think about ordering dinner. You see a meal for $15. Seems reasonable. Then, without really noticing, a delivery fee appears, a service fee, maybe a small order fee, then a suggested tip already filled in for you. By the time you reach the payment screen, your $15 dinner has quietly become $26. You didn't choose to spend $11 on fees, it just happened, one tap at a time. Now imagine doing that twice a week. Those convenience costs alone can easily add up to more than $1,000 every year. Not the food, just the cost of avoiding the trip. Convenience isn't free, it simply hides its price until after you've paid it. Here's a sentence worth remembering. Companies don't make money because you spend a lot once. They make money because spending feels too easy to question. That's a completely different business model. Now let's look at the fourth and perhaps the most dangerous leak of all. Lifestyle creep. Unlike subscriptions or delivery fees, this one doesn't show up as a separate charge. It shows up after good news. You get a raise, a promotion, a bonus. For a brief moment, you're earning more than ever before. Then something curious happens. You upgrade your apartment, you lease a nicer car, you move to the premium streaming plan, you start eating out a little more often. Nothing dramatic, just small improvements. Each one feels deserved. I've worked hard. I earn more now. I can afford it. And maybe you can. The problem is that every upgrade becomes permanent. Your income increases, but your breathing room doesn't. Economists call this the hedonic treadmill.
As your income rises, your expectations quietly rise with it. Very quickly, what once felt like a luxury starts feeling normal. Then, before long, normal becomes something you can no longer imagine living without. That's why so many people say something surprising. I earn twice as much as I used to, but I don't feel any richer. Their paycheck changed, their lifestyle changed with it. The gap between the two barely moved. Now step back and look at all four leaks together. Subscriptions, small purchases, convenience fees, lifestyle creep. Individually, none of them seem powerful enough to empty an entire paycheck. Together, they become something much harder to escape. Think of your paycheck like a bucket of water. Subscriptions drill one tiny hole. Impulse purchases drill another. Convenience fees add a third. Lifestyle creep opens the biggest hole of all. None of them empty the bucket by themselves, but together they make it almost impossible to keep the bucket full. And that's why payday never seems to last as long as you expected. So, if these four invisible leaks are quietly working against you every month, how do you actually stop them? Fortunately, the solution isn't earning more money. It's something much simpler and much more powerful.
So, how do you stop your paycheck from disappearing? The answer isn't to become a completely different person. You don't need to stop buying coffee. You don't need to cancel every subscription, and you definitely don't need to feel guilty every time you spend money. The goal isn't to stop spending. It's to start spending consciously. Because once you notice where your money is actually going, you can finally decide whether it's going there on purpose. Start with the simplest step, an audit. Not a rough guess, not a mental estimate, an actual look at your last 2 months of bank statements. Go through every transaction, highlight every recurring charge, every subscription, every automatic payment, every service you forgot you were paying for. Don't judge the numbers, just look at them honestly. You'll probably find at least one charge you completely forgot existed, maybe 2, maybe more. And here's something interesting. The easiest money to save is often the money you never realized you were losing. Next, pay attention to small purchases, not because they're bad, because they're invisible. Try one simple rule. Before buying anything under $20 that wasn't already planned, wait until tomorrow. That's it. No complicated budgeting system, no spreadsheet, just one night. You'd be surprised how many purchases feel essential for about 5 minutes and completely unnecessary the next morning. You're not removing your freedom to spend. You're simply giving yourself enough time to make the decision consciously. That tiny pause creates something modern spending has almost completely removed: friction. Now, look at convenience spending. The next time you order food, don't just look at the price of the meal. Look at the final number, the delivery fee, the service charge, the taxes, the tip. Then ask yourself one question: would I still choose this if these costs were listed first instead of last? Sometimes the answer will still be yes, and that's perfectly fine, but you'll be choosing convenience instead of accidentally paying for it. That's a very different mindset. Finally, protect yourself from lifestyle creep. The next time your income increases, don't rush to upgrade your life. Pause, just for 30 days. Let the extra money arrive, let yourself experience having a little more financial breathing room, then decide what deserves an upgrade and what doesn't. If you direct even half of every raise towards savings, investments, or paying down debt before increasing your spending, something remarkable starts to happen. Your income grows, and for the first time, your wealth grows with it. Not because you're earning dramatically more, because you're keeping more of what you've already earned. There's a quote often attributed to Warren Buffett: the difference between successful people and really successful people is that really successful people say no to almost everything. That doesn't just apply to billion-dollar investments, it applies to everyday life.
saying no to another subscription, to another convenience fee, to another purchase you didn't really plan. Each decision feels insignificant, but over months and years, those tiny decisions become habits, and habits become financial outcomes. Now think back to the beginning of this video. 5 days after payday, you opened your banking app and wondered where all your money had gone. The strange thing is, it probably didn't disappear all at once. It slipped away quietly. One subscription, one impulse purchase, one delivery fee, one lifestyle upgrade. None of them seemed important until together they became the reason your paycheck never seemed to last. Here's the lesson most people never hear. Being broke before payday usually isn't caused by one catastrophic financial mistake. It's caused by dozens of tiny decisions that never felt important enough to question. And that's exactly why they're so powerful. Because the biggest threat to your finances isn't always what you can see. Sometimes it's what you've stopped noticing. The next time you get paid, don't ask yourself, how can I spend less? Ask a better question. Where is my money quietly going before I even notice it's gone? Because once you can answer that question, everything begins to change. Not overnight, not because you suddenly earn more, but because you've finally taken back something modern spending quietly stolen from you. Awareness. And awareness is where every good financial decision begins. Here's one question to remember. The next time you're about to tap Buy Now or confirm another purchase, pause for just a moment and ask yourself, will I still be glad I spent this money a month from now? That single question won't stop every unnecessary purchase, but it will stop enough of them to change the way your paycheck feels. Because staying ahead financially isn't usually about making one brilliant decision. It's about noticing the hundreds of tiny decisions before they quietly make themselves for you. Your paycheck was never too small to matter. It was simply being pulled in more directions than you ever realized. And once you see those invisible leaks, it's almost impossible to unsee them. If you found this video helpful, consider subscribing to the Capital Beacon. Every week, complicated money topics get broken down into simple, practical lessons so you can make smarter financial decisions with confidence. And if there's another money myth or financial habit you've always wanted explained, leave it in the comments. It might become the next video. Because understanding money isn't about earning more. It's about making sure more of what you earn stays with you.